Today we are going to learn about the gray matter of the spinal cord. In this slide you could see a section of the spinal cord. The H-shaped structure is the gray matter and on the outside lies the white matter. The gray matter could be divided into three different parts: anterior, lateral and the posterior gray matter. The anterior part is labeled as 1 and over here lie the nerve cell bodies that are responsible to supply the skeletal muscles. The lateral gray column is marked as 2 and it is responsible to supply the autonomic nervous system. And the third part, which comprises of the posterior gray column, neuron cell bodies, they are responsible to receive different sensations from the body. In this slide you could see the nerve cell bodies which are present in the anterior gray column, and there are three groups of the neuron cell bodies in the anterior gray column: medial, central and lateral. The medial, marked as 1, colored green, this neuron cell body group extends throughout the length of the spinal cord. It could be present at cervical, thoracic, lumbar or sacral levels. And over here the nerve cell bodies, when they give up fibers, these are going to supply the muscles of the neck, trunk, the thoracic muscles which are intercostals, abdominal and perineal musculature. The second group of neurons is a central group. Now this is going to be restricted only to cervical level. The first group is the phrenic nucleus. It is going to be present at C3, C4 and C5 and is responsible to supply the muscle of the diaphragm, which is the muscle of respiration. The second nucleus group is the accessory nuclear group. It extends from C1 to C5 and 6 and is responsible to supply the muscle of trapezius and sternocleidomastoid. And the latter group, which is marked 3 and is colored red, it is present only at cervical level of the spinal cord and lumbosacral segments of the spinal cord. And these neuron cell bodies are going to supply the upper and lower limbs. Remember, upper limb is supplied by brachial plexus and the lower by lumbar plexus. Now here you could see a group of neuron which is colored as yellow that represents the lateral gray column. The group here is called the intromediolateral group. Now this group is also restricted to certain segments of the spinal cord. From T1 to L2, L3 are present sympathetic neuron cell bodies, and from S2, 3, 4 are present parasympathetic neuron cell bodies. Now these neuron cell bodies at their levels are going to give preganglionic nerve fibers, and these nerve fibers are going to later on terminate at a ganglion which is located distally. We'll talk about these neuron cell groups later on in the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. Now in this slide you could see the arrangement of neuron cell bodies in the posterior gray column. And you could see there are 4 neuron cell body groups present in posterior gray column. We'll discuss about these gray column in detail when we go to the ascending tracts. For now, we'll just know their names. The first one, which is colored purple, is the substantia gelatinosa. Now this one is going to extend throughout the length of the spinal cord and is responsible to receive the sensation of pain, temperature and touch. So you have to remember that it is present throughout the length of the spinal cord. The second group, which is present anterior to substantia gelatinosa, comprises of nucleus proprius. Now this too extends throughout the length of the spinal cord, just like substantia gelatinosa, and it is responsible to receive the information regarding proprioception and 2-point discrimination. Again, it is going to come into discussion when we will talk about the ascending tracts. The third group comprises of nucleus dorsalis or Clark's column. It extends from level of C8 to L3 and L4, responsible for proprioceptive information. And the fourth group, which is present lateral to nucleus dorsalis, which is marked red here, and is fourth group. It extends from T1 to L3 level of the segments of spinal cord and is responsible to receive visceral afferent information, that is information from the viscera, glands, blood vessels, internal organs. Based on previous information, we can predict which group of neurons is going to be present at certain level of spinal cord. Now this is the third cervical segment of spinal cord, and you could see that some of the groups are present here. In the anterior gray column, you could see that all 3 groups that we discussed, the medial, central and lateral, 3 of them are present here. The medial one we talked about, that which is colored blue here and is marked 1, extends throughout the length of the spinal cord, so it is going to be present at C3 level. The second group, which was the central group, we talked about two nuclei there, the phrenic and the spinal accessory nucleus. Now the phrenic nucleus extends from C3 to C5, so it is going to be present at C3. The accessory nucleus extends from C1 to C5 or 6, therefore it is also going to be here. The lateral group is also going to be present at the anterior gray column at the level of C3 because that group of neurons is going to supply the upper limb. We cannot see the lateral gray column here because we talked about it, that it is restricted to thoracolumbar level or it extends from S2, S3 to S4. In the posterior gray column, you could see only two groups of neurons, substantia gelatinosa and nucleus proprius, as we said that these two extend throughout the length of the spinal cord, and the rest of the two groups, one starts from the C8 and the other from T1, they are not going to be present at the level of C3. Similarly, we could look at another section. For example, we have 6th thoracic segment of spinal cord, and over here we can see that anterior gray column only comprises of the medial group. There is no lateral and central group. Why? Because central group, we said that it is going to be present only in certain cervical region, and the lateral group supplies the upper and lower limb, as upper limb is supplied by brachial plexus, which have their region from C5 to T1. That is why those neurocell bodies are not located here. But the red color shows the lateral gray column is present here because we said that it extends from thoracolumbar segments and also again S2, S3 and S4. So that's T6, that neural group is going to be present. Now we can see that all neurons that we discussed in the posterior gray column are located at the level of T6. Yes, because substantia gelatinosa and nucleus proprius extend throughout the length of the spinal cord, and the blue one, the Clark's column and the visceral after nuclei group, which is marked purple, these both are present at the thoracic level. That is why these neuron groups are going to be present. So some are present at certain segments and some are not. So like in previous segments, we can also predict which group of neurons is going to be present at L3 level. You can see the structure which is marked as 7 and 6 represents the group of neurons in the anterior gray column. The 7th is the medial group and 6 is the lateral group. There is no central group here because we know that it is only present at certain cervical segments. The lateral gray column, which is marked 5, is present at the level of L3 because it is responsible to supply the sympathetic nervous system some preganglionic nerve fibers. And we talked about this group extends from T1 to L3 and S2, S3, S4. That's why we are going to say that it is present at the level of L3. And you can see that all neural cell groups that we discussed in the posterior gray column are located at the level of L3. 1 and 2 are substantia gelatinosa and nucleus proprius respectively. Third group is Clark's column, and fourth group, which is colored green, is the visceral afferent nucleus. And we talked about them that substantia gelatinosa and nucleus proprius, they are present throughout the length of the spinal cord, whereas the rest two, which are labeled 3 and 4, the nucleus dorsalis and the visceral afferent nucleus, these are present at certain level of the spinal cord and they do extend to the level of L3. That is why we are going to show them here. For more in-depth information regarding this topic, you can go and check Snell's Neuroanatomy and Gray's Anatomy.